So kicking things off, just real quick on who is CTE, so what our experience is and why some of the best practices that we will subject you to, if you may, and thank you so much for sitting through the conversation. Why you should, why these best practices and how these best practices have come about. So we're a global services and operations firm with about 500 plus trained certified professionals worldwide. We've designed, developed, delivered, and managed solutions for several large, including Fortune 500 customers and smaller customers, and we currently have several thousand instances under management on AWS. We were recently chosen to manage the cloud infrastructure for an ISV that is delivering today a platform as a service for their flagship offering. They're a $1.3 billion publicly traded ISV. They chose Amazon as their sole infrastructure provider and us as the sole managed services provider to enable them to onboard and then manage their customers. They're focused on financial services, insurance, and healthcare companies, and we provide the onboarding and then the ongoing operations support for their customers. We're also, as part of our global business, India is a market that's seen tremendous growth in the telecom sector, and we are helping manage some of the systems for some of India's largest telecom companies. And we have on the development side a CMMI level 5 certifications for our team, and then for our network operations centers, ISO 27001 certifications, similar to what AWS has for their data centers. Okay, so how do we get going over here? Jay had outlined, at a high level what some of the infrastructure capabilities of AWS are. And then essentially this is, on the next slide you will see, a shared responsibility model. You've got the infrastructure, which AWS in this case provides, or you might be doing this currently in-house. AWS is a great alternative for the infrastructure, but understanding that the application and the operations are the responsibility that are not currently borne, if you may, by AWS. So this responsibility falls on the enterprise IT department or the ISV that's looking to launch its software as a service or deliver its software on the cloud. The CTE assists both in the development of the application, the design and development to make sure that the application is indeed going to be cloud ready, and then the ongoing monitoring and management of that solution. On the next slide, basically at a high level, what are some of the design best practices that we have observed? So when you design for the cloud, keeping security, business continuity, elasticity, and scale in mind, here are some of the things to focus on. Protecting your data. While that's a no-brainer, there are some best practices around that, which we will cover. Designing for failure. So essentially, when something fails, your system by itself really doesn't fail, so nothing in the eyes of the customer is really failing. Making sure that you can handle reboots, restarts, instances going up and down gracefully in your application. And that typically involves you to decouple the application, making it stateless, so not only can you handle these kinds of situations, but you can also effectively scale. Horizontally in this case, vertical scale is relatively easier to achieve in modern, outside of the cloud anyway. But being able to horizontally scale oftentimes requires your architecture to be able to support horizontal scale. So designing that and keeping that in mind during your design and development phases is critical. Another area in order to be able to handle, especially a large, typically unplanned spike in traffic, one of the design considerations to make is isolating your traffic, separating your static versus dynamic content, separating your reads from writes, and this allows you to truly get truly design with scale in mind. In the next slide, we talk about how you secure your systems. We get into this a little bit more in a future slide, but we talk about how essentially to secure the instance images and the application stack that you're using. Leveraging geographically distributed regions that Jay was talking about, as well as the availability zones for disaster recovery, and creating an automation roadmap. Not everything needs to be automated right away. There's a cost associated with certain aspects, so prioritizing how you're going to go about doing this is an exercise to be taken typically at design and development and then rollout phase. Establishing separate development, test, staging, production, training systems, and environments that you can dynamically manage is one of the benefits that the cloud provides. Also making sure that you keep them consistent so you can minimize the errors that happen because of environment drift. This is possible to do very cost effectively in the cloud. Then determining what to monitor, what thresholds to set, what alarms to trigger, keeping the paradigm that not everything that is counted counts. So focusing on what specifically you would like to measure so you're not getting hit with you're not getting inundated with a lot of alarms and data, and making sure that you can focus on the key aspects that will indicate and give you insight into the health of your systems. Making sure that you can document, test, and constantly focus on continuous improvement via certifications and audits. More so than anything else, the audits and certifications, so to speak, keep you honest, if you may. Whether you choose to get official certification or not, they are good standards and paradigms to live by, if you may. Moving to the next slide, as we found with a lot of the conversations, especially with larger companies with sensitive data, the top 3 issues that come to mind tend to be security, security, and security. So if we see on the next slide some of the security best practices that we have found while dealing with these customers around hardening your Amazon machine images and creating gold images. We get into some of those details in the next slide. Securing your data in flight and at rest. We get into details on this side too. Setting up your security groups. So Amazon provides a way in which you can control traffic to instances, what ports, how do you get a group of instances to quickly get the same security profile. Security groups are a great way in which you can actually do that. Separating out the tiers of your application, so your web services, your web server security groups, your application server, database, operating system security groups. This allows you to get some control over what access and what traffic is going in and out of these various components. How do you control those, and how do you ensure that only authorized services are able to handle those communications? Also establishing your key pair management policies. This is for Amazon certificates as well as any other certificates, passwords, key pairs that you may have across your operations and product stacks. So ensuring that you focus on the generation of those keys, the rotation at periodic levels, retrieval, distribution, destruction of those key pairs, and making sure that you account both for the routine cases when key pairs may age, or exception cases when they are lost or compromised. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about what it takes to get your AMIs or your Amazon machine images battle ready, if you may. So ready to be deployed over, in several cases, the public internet. So the output of what we would strongly recommend to be a documented hardening process is what we put out as a gold image. You want to make sure that you define a patch management process to keep these gold images up to date. And creating separate gold images for different components of your stack. Your base operating system, your application server gold image, your database gold image, so on and so forth. So these can all be managed and patched separately and independently. Configuring your firewall on the operating system or the instance that you're running. This provides finer grained control over service level access that you may have. Reviewing your boot scripts so that every process that starts up when your instance launches is understood and only the services that are absolutely needed are started. This allows you to bound your security challenge that you face. AWS has certificate-based SSH. Additional steps to take, including that you might want to take, include things like disabling remote root logins, restricting access to known IPs. Even though IPs can be spoofed, it provides an added layer of security. Obviously, you want to make sure that you account for changes in those IPs as the IP address space that you're coming from may change. For cases where you have password-based access, typically for user accounts also or service accounts, either at the operating system or app level, you want to ensure that you have password management and aging policies in place. You want to enforce strong passwords that you have, and do things like keeping your history secure to keep it away from prying eyes. Setting up as needed intrusion prevention, intrusion detection or antivirus systems, checking for rootkits, so on and so forth.